All right, just doing a quick audio check, and we are just about ready to go. All right, hello everybody. Welcome to part three of drawing the Temple of Gnosis. Today we're going to be working in colored pencils, finally. My name is Calvin. Welcome to the Breaking Patterns channel on a Friday night. We're going to start fairly soon, but I just wanted to share that I received a book in the mail from my fiance that I've been waiting for a while. It's a book that she really liked. It's called Elements of Design, and it's by Rowena Reed Costello, and it's for students and designers alike. And the interesting thing about it is it goes into principles of 3D design. And there's many different examples on the inside. You can kind of see there um, of exercises that you can go through to think about 3D shapes in space. This channel mostly is about two-dimensional drawings and soon to be paintings. But I also have dealt with sculpture a lot over the years, and you do need to think about composition, but in a completely different way. Um, and this book kind of helps with that. I put a link in the description for this on Amazon. It is, I assume, sort of an out of print or rare book, so the new price is kind of crazy right now, but there are used prices that are way more reasonable. I highly recommend this book if you use that link. It does support the channel. If you don't, you don't. Whatever. I can't force you, but I would very much suggest that you look at that book or look at some of the principles that are in that book if you can. I don't know what resources there are out on the internet about it, but yeah, we may go through some of it in the future on this channel. Um, Hopefully you like and subscribe and follow this channel. That way you're notified every time there's a new live stream or a new video. We do videos about our travels as well as our travels in the art space. If you were joining us on the last few videos, you would know that we're actually working on a drawing. This picture is our source. It's a picture of the Temple of Gnosis in Crete. We finished off with just drawing in the pencil drawing, the structure for the pencil drawing, and we're going to work in colored pencils now. I'll show you where we're at. The 2-point perspective drawing. It's very light right now, and that's because we're going to fill it in with colored pencils. But if you haven't finished drawing up to this point, look in the channel live streams. You'll find part one and part two. They actually just go over how we arrived at this point in the first place. But now we're going to work on coloring it in. And just so that you feel more comfortable, I'm going to be drawing or coloring this in with old Crayola pencils. Yes, that's right. Just plain old fashioned, cheapy peepy Crayola colored pencils. So don't feel like you need to buy super expensive colored pencils for this. These are your basic run of the mill colored pencils. I said in the last video as some homework, and you can do so as well if you would like. You do still have some time before I get started here. Um, If you don't have colored pencils like this, ask your friends, ask your folks. Chances are they'll have a old Ziploc bag sitting around with a bunch of these colored pencils, probably relatively unused. Seems like a lot of these don't go used. They go unused. And people will be willing to just hand them to you because they don't know what to do with them. They are relatively inexpensive as well. You can pick them up at pretty much any craft store, even big box stores. These are the colored pencils that they have. My favorite colored pencils to use are Prismacolor. I do not have any right now, but you'll find that those carry a lot better on pretty much any paper. Kind of a quick note too, and I don't know if I really underlined this enough, but last time on the stream, I was talking about how the paper actually does matter a little bit. You're not going to want to use paper that's like from a printer, although you could do that just as practice. The colored pencils will not stick to that type of paper as well. It might not really with this type of paper, but what you want is just a little bit of a rougher surface on it, not so smooth. And this is what's called tooth. Tooth is basically just a rough texture that can grab and hold on to the colored pencil pigment. Okay, the next thing that we're going to also talk about before we get started is the correct color when you lay down your drawing. You want to make sure that you're choosing the right color. So just because you see blue doesn't necessarily mean it's the right blue. Just going to erase some of this structural drawing that I drew over the course of this. It's not needed. You need to really pay attention to what you're actually seeing. You might think you're seeing a peach when really it's um, like a beige. You might think you're seeing an orange when it's really a goldenrod color. I'll help you through this process. We'll keep looking at our source material and we'll make adjustments. The other thing too is there might be pencil colors that don't exist, and you might need to take multiple colored pencils and do some color mixing. I'm sure we'll do that in tonight's drawing. It just happens. Doesn't matter if you buy the big 150 pencil kit, there's always going to be colors that you're going to find in the real world that you do not have unmixed. Um, it's just the way that it goes. So take a second, go get some colored pencils. I'll wait for you here. I'm just going to get my source material on my screen to look at, and we'll get started. So, yeah. I think another thing too that should be said is we're gonna use like a piece of scratch paper to lay down on our surface so that I can lay my hand down, do my coloring in, and not smudge any of the stuff that I've laid down. And that includes more colored pencils and the graphite that I've laid down so far. So we're going to begin, I think, fairly soon here. What else do I need? I think I just need to grab some of these pencils and start looking at the color I have on my screen for my source material. I think what I'll do is I'll start with this dark blue and I'll start filling in some of that sky that you see. That's kind of what I started with the first time because then I can work down. I'm probably not going to work so much left to right. I never can seem to like keep up with that. The whole point of going left to right is so that you don't smudge, but we do have this piece of paper that will keep us safe. Um, but working down is better because as I go down, we can work on it in layers, basically. Yeah, I think I'll do that. All right, so I chose like a real dark blue here, and I'm just going to be really light when I lay this down. You might be tempted with some older Crayola colored pencils to press really hard because you're not seeing the results. We can just keep working it layer over layer. Okay. Um, I think to start too, I should say that those clouds aren't really white. There are some parts where it's absolutely white, but it's not very many parts. Actually, pretty much most of it is like a light blue. Like this is like a dark blue. That'll be like the darkest parts of the sky, probably up here. Can you see that in the drawing? The darkest blue is up here, but then the rest of the white is really light blue. So think about that when you're doing this beginning part. We don't want to just draw big white clouds. You could if you wanted to, but we're not going to do that. We're going to just kind of lightly, just very, oh, wow. Yeah, this paper is a lot better than what I was using before. It's very nice. So I'm just lightly, and you don't need to be exact with this either, not like with the architectural parts. I'm just gonna lightly start coloring in, but keep in mind where the light spots are. Yeah, it's looking pretty good so far. I'm really looking at the movement of the clouds in the sky when I'm drawing this. Kind of like the clouds are cascading down like that. Just like when I'm painting, I really am focusing on filling in the whole canvas, in this case, the whole paper, with color. That way I can start layering on top of it. I'm not worried about fine detail at this stage. I'm working on laying down marks, getting something started. I do have an eraser handy just in case. This time I'm using a plastic eraser over a kneaded eraser, but just be cautious because um, these can get dirtied up pretty bad and it sticks on. And it can transfer on to other erasing that you do later. Okay, that was interesting. I have like a really old version of the same color, and you can see that over time, this blue has actually gotten a lot lighter. And that's something to consider too with colored pencils, um, is something called light fastness. Now, what I'm talking about is the pigment that you're putting down on the paper right now. Say you were to finish this drawing, you're like, I love this. I'm going to frame it and give it to somebody. If that picture frame doesn't have like UV protective glass on it, and let's say, you know, the person you gave it to hung it up on a wall that gets hit with direct sunlight, the pigment will actually start to fade, believe it or not. If you've ever left like a magazine or a newspaper in a window over time, you'll notice that it starts to fade. It's the same thing with colored pencils, and they actually do make quite expensive colored pencils that have like up to 80% color fastness, but even that is still subject to color loss. And the pencils themselves can be like that too, a little bit. Um, I don't have tons of experience with that. I don't do lots of colored pencil drawing all the time, but I am aware of that. But let's just let's just paint with colored pencils. Let's just do this. Not worry about the future. Let's live in the moment. And the moment is colored pencils. Now, I kind of started going this way a lot, and then I started going this way, being really gingerly with how I'm holding the pencil and how I'm moving it across the surface. And this kind of makes a staticky kind of texture to it. You start to lose the motion of it. Okay, let's introduce another blue into this and see how it looks. So I got this literally is called light blue. Let's see what happens when I add this to the darkest area. So it's rather similar. Let's try sky blue. So that's interesting. This one's literally named the color of what we're drawing. So the other thing too is I got these little pencil sharpeners. I have one that's actually kind of like a makeup pencil sharpener, and I'm not too fond of that because it's kind of for a different thickness of pencil, but then I have actually a pencil sharpener from like a drawing pack. I'm just gonna sharpen this up a little bit. Looks like it's been used already. See what that color does. Okay. Adds kind of a little bit of a different dimension to it, but it's still like I don't want to press too hard. That's always kind of my um tendency. And then you get these like grooves in the paper, and you don't really want to do that. You want to keep the smoothness intact. when you press hard, you can see those grooves in there, and it's kind of it's just not pleasing. It just looks bad. So kind of a little goal for myself with this one. On the first time that I drew this, it had been quite some time since I did colored pencils, and I was like, man, are these kind of like old pencils? Like, what's the deal? But the more and more I thought about it, it's like, no, it is definitely a light touch that I need to look for. And you'll also find that you won't constantly have to sharpen the pencils. If you use a heavy hand with a, you'll wear down the pencils really fast. The other thing we can do too is when you get to like edges like this, you can put the piece of paper that you have and use that as like a mask, is what you would call it. And you can get right up into the edge, and you're not polluting this other area that you want to be a different color. What other blues do I have? We could get really, that's a light blue. This is aqua green. I don't really see aqua in there. I just want to get like these dark segments really chromatic. What I mean by chromatic is having a lot of pigment, deep, rich color, like paint straight out of a tube, not like toned down by any white paint or black paint. The other thing that we could use in that area is a purple, a violet. Use this very sparingly though, at first, to see what happens. Yeah, that's almost just like the blue. So one thing that people do as well when it comes to colored pencils, and I just learned this a few years ago, is they'll actually take like a solvent, and they make colored pencil solvent, but you could just use mineral spirits that you buy. Probably get art grade though. Don't go to Home Depot and get something really harsh. Those fumes are very toxic. But get like an artist grade. Try to get something that's like doesn't have like fumes, like something like Gamblin, for instance. And what they'll do is they'll fill it all in and then take a solvent on a brush and blend these together. It's not exactly like watercolors, but it has a somewhat similar effect. Um, you don't like do anything heavy-handed with it. It's just sort of like this light smoothing effect. A lot of applications are popular, like flowers, for instance. People do flowers, and they'll do an up close photograph of like flower, and look at that nice smooth quality to the petals, not by this, but by the solvent smoothing it out. That's one trick of the trade that I had never heard of. Um, when I was in art school, we never did anything with colored pencils. So I never learned about it until much later. I figured it out from videos on YouTube, actually. Um, learned quite a bit over the years from just YouTube videos, and I hope you learn a lot from what I do too. Learn a lot about like the philosophy behind this as well, the attitudes, the thought process. It's not just about like how good you are at making something look like something else. It really is a journey. It's about self-discovery. It's about habits, making good habits. It's about breaking patterns, like the name of the channel. It's really what it's all about. Okay, so it's starting to look like something. When I'm looking at the camera view of this, it's a lot more purple. Um, and maybe if I took a step back, I would think that it's a little too much purple. But I have like this darker blue. We could work more of that in. I'm not going to spend too much time on the sky at first. Like, again, as I said, we don't want to work completely on just the details. We want to fill in most of the canvas first. I think I could hit this area again with a blue. I am applying a little bit more pressure, so I really want that deep, dark blue, but I'm still being extra sensitive. These pencils still don't really give you exactly what you're looking for, but it's good to practice. It's good to practice with constraints too. Like you can't just always have everything your way. In art, there is a lot of experimentation and hard, painful bottlenecks that you have to go through sometimes, and it just contributes to your growth. It really does. Giving yourself constraints on a pretty steady basis is generally what I do. And that includes like drawing something that you know you're going to have a hard time with, painting something that you know you're going to have a hard time with, or painting a certain way you've never painted before. Like drawing or painting a new style. That's hard to do. It's like relearning how to draw. Um, you can't just rest on your laurels all the time. And that goes for life too. You need to challenge yourself. You need to have a learning mentality throughout your life. You can't always be chasing after instant gratification. When I was younger, I used to hate when I would be like, oh, how do I get good at something? And then people would say, well, you need to practice, 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 practice. I don't, I don't like using the P word when I'm describing this, but it really does come down to a lot of practice. And that's what I'm doing right now, practicing with stuff that I don't normally work with. Okay. Take that sky blue. Just go across this some more just to darken it up. Okay, let's work on a different portion of this. So let's go back to thinking about the color. Um, we could work on the bottom portion next because I feel like we did about a third of the surface. Let's work on this bottom color just to get used to the colored pencils. Want to kind of just do the easiest things first whenever I just started doing something. So this is probably too dark. This is a harvest gold if you're following along with Crayola. It's a little too dark. You want to go with something light. Let's see, what else do I have? I have golden yellow. Now that looks really light, but I'm thinking that yellow isn't the way to go when I'm looking at the picture as a whole. That lightness, but not that color. Let's see. This is sand. And I quite like that. It's not yellow enough, but I can mix in yellow as I go on. You know what I mean? We're mixing the colors on the surface. And I'm just gonna do just like because it's pretty even across. I'm just gonna fill in the whole thing with this color, okay? This is gonna be kind of boring, but very hypnotic. When I was in art school, people would say it's therapeutic. I haven't heard anybody say that in a long time. I never quite understood why they would always want to make something repetitive seem like a therapy. I just like it because you can just sit here and get into sort of like a hypnotic or meditative state and not think about it. I don't find it particularly therapeutic, but I guess it could be. I just like seeing the pencil go back and forth, like trying to make it even. Almost time to sharpen this again. So another thing that you can get, by the way, too, is when the pencils get down to the very end, it's sort of like hard to deal with. But you don't want to like throw away like a perfectly good like end to the colored pencil. Is something wrong with my camera here? Let me see if I can fix my camera. Getting a weird glitch. See if that fixes it. I guess I'm gone now. It's okay. No big deal. The camera got a weird little split screen there. I don't know what the story is with that, but you can just focus on the drawing. You don't need to see me while I'm hovering this. So there's definitely like a pattern coming through that I can see from this paper. So it's not exactly the best paper. These aren't exactly the best pencils, but I did that mostly because it's just like I'm working with what I have. And it goes back to constraints. Um, it also kind of has to do with letting go of attachment, which is something I talk about kind of a lot. It's too often when people first try and do like drawing, even older people, um, they're very, very concerned about it looking good the first time or getting it right the first time. And then it brings up all these past fears about, um, or past traumas about things looking right or they're not being good, quote unquote, at drawing. And the only way that you can get over this is to get rid of your attachment to things and just do anything. Just do anything. Don't worry about who's going to see it. You know, you could have a secret drawing book that no one sees. You could do these drawings at night when no one's around or everyone's asleep, and you never have to show anybody. These aren't going to be judged. The only person that's judging it in those situations is you. And you need to let go of that. It's a healthy thing to let go of that. Um, don't let your perceived lack of skill hold you back from trying. Okay. I think the next thing I'm going to do. So there's some areas in here where there's kind of like a mustard yellow. It's called bronze yellow. And I'm just going to kind of work that in is like a harder. I'm barely pressing right now. This is just a really nice pencil, but I'm going to fill in this line using the straight edge. Boy, that looks nice. That looks like a spicy colored pencil. I like that. I'm gonna go a little bit lighter over here though, because that area, it does look lighter. It's less chromatic in the drawing. And then this was a little bit darker. That looks good. That looks like something. Okay. Another thing, I'm gonna keep this one handy because as you can see throughout this area, there's a lot of that color. It's sort of like a moss kind of a thing. And I could like work that in. There's like little cobblestones where these are like the shadows. I'm gonna keep that handy. I'm gonna kind of work that in a little bit, but I think I'm gonna work on that one a little bit later. I'm just getting a feel for the lay of the land in this drawing. It can, maybe I'll hold on to it for a little bit. Just fill in. You can kind of use this too to like frame some of that lens distortion a little bit better. I do want a little bit of that to come out in this drawing. You can do that by putting these darker tones into the periphery, much like our vision. Um, that's kind of cool. Um, there's a little bit right here too. Okay, where was that one that was called sand? Let's work a little bit with the sand one because I feel like this. I think up here it's kind of like a sand color. I'm gonna use my straight edge. I'll zoom in a little bit for you guys so you're not like completely lost. This is what I'm talking about. This band. Maybe I need to sharpen this pencil a little bit. Of course, this isn't the same color all the way around. It is sort of the same base color, but some on some of these sides, it's in shadow and it's not in direct sunlight. It's going to be darker. I'm going to go all the way around this and just kind of work that in. I'm going to sharpen this. It gets kind of annoying when they get down to the wood. There's all these flat spots. It's hard to tell where it's going to go when you touch the paper. It's much lighter on this side, but I'm not going to worry about that yet. I'm just going to fill in this base color. To make something darker, you could add more pressure. You could also use a darker color to give the impression of shadow over the color that already exists. You don't have to think too much about this, but essentially, the color of something is how much light is reflecting off of it. And when there's a lot of light hitting something, the color changes. Let's see, what other colors do we have here? Okay, so this one's called tan. And I tell you what, I think this tan, let's try it in one of these upper parts first. So you might have a really hard time seeing what I'm doing here, but use your best judgment. So I'm going to use this tan and fill in one of these really tight molding pieces. Yeah, that looks nice. Now that's the one right below the big band. Okay. So I've been looking at some other streams that people are doing. I'm kind of having a hard time finding people that are doing just straight up pencil drawings, live streams. There's some videos where people are talking about like techniques and things like that, but it's very rare, at least for me so far, to find live streams of this so I can kind of get ideas about how I can structure and format this. A fair amount of people are doing sort of like anime tablet drawing, and I'm well aware of that over the years. I've seen plenty of that, but I just really haven't seen more like I don't want to use the word fine art, but that is what it's called. Less animation, I guess, not cartoon kind of drawing videos. I'm wondering why that is. Are people spending way too much time drawing and not sharing what they draw? Let me know in the comments if there's any streams that you think I should watch. I'll definitely give them a watch while I'm drawing or doing some other homework just to see what people do. I did watch one the other day that was called Schaefer Fine Art. I think the guy's name was Matt Schaefer. But he didn't live stream too much, or at least they weren't up any longer. Every couple months or so, he was doing live streams and not like doing it on the regular. Um, I really plan on doing this quite often if I can. It's not always possible for me to do that, given where I'm living at any one time or how busy I am. But I think the next few months are looking pretty good. See if we can make this happen on a regular basis. Now, this is going to be a little less guided today, I think. I really want you to work with what you have and see what it yields. If you're not happy with this, start over. Maybe do it without colored pencils. It's up to you. I'm going to take a second here to try and fix this camera. And that'll also give you the opportunity to catch up with where we are. It's kind of crazy that it just died on me, but GoPro gonna GoPro, I guess. That happens sometimes. There you go. Zoom out a little bit for you. Basically where we're at, and that can help you like take a step back too. A lot of these bricks though, they're really kind of basically colored, that sand color. And I have to fill in the other ones. They're very, very close to the color of everything that's on the ground. So I think the sand pencil is going to get a workout. Why don't we just fill in a lot of this? Now, one thing I'm doing too is I'm going brick by brick whenever there are like blocks, because that'll give it more of a block shape. Just trust me on this. You don't want to just color the whole thing in. It'll look more staged. Because if you do look, the dirt from like rain and stuff does go around the borders of where the bricks meet usually. That's how you get that nice brick kind of look. I'm staying in the lines, so to speak, on these parts. This side's a little bit darker. It's in shadow. So, just kind of a little history on Greco-Roman sculpture and architecture. I think a lot of times we don't really remember, at least I don't, or most people don't know in the first place, that most of it was painted. They would put plaster over a lot of things and color it. Those statues that you see in museums that are white, those were painted, most likely. That's not always the case, but if you ever go to a museum that has great Greco-Roman sculpture in it, sometimes if you look at the signs that go along with the art, they'll say, look, it has traces of pigment on it still, which is kind of rare. Um, a lot of these got buried and that pigment was removed. Interestingly enough, when people made sculptures that were to imitate those things much later, like in the Italian Renaissance, they, I'm not going to say they didn't know that they were painted, but it seems like maybe they were a little ignorant that they were painted because they would just carve a big block of stone, a big block of marble, and they would just leave it white. They would not paint them. So I'm not sure if they like thought that that was ugly, or I don't know if they were like trying to make it seem like someone just dug it up. But that continues on to this day. Um, People were making sculptures like that well into the 1800s. There's still people I see on Instagram and YouTube that do marble stone carving, and they do not paint them at all. And the reason why I bring that up because this portion of the Palace of Knossos is painted. It's an intervention. This wasn't the parts that are painted in this picture are modern. They're from the early 1900s. The guy, and I should have just looked it up before I started this stream because I keep mentioning him. The guy that dug all this up knew the value in this as a tourist attraction, but educational. And so what he wanted to do was show, I don't know if he necessarily wanted to rebuild everything, but he wanted to show what things really looked like, which is quite an interesting concept. Um, Especially for that time, this wasn't happening on the regular at all. It's like an immersive landscape or an immersive museum experience. Um, he didn't quite complete that. He didn't excavate everything either, and there are parts that are still being shall we say, lightly excavated. Um, there's parts of it that were excavated and not preserved, so they just have like these large corrugated steel roofs over the excavation to protect it because the elements actually are ruining what was left over. And some of these interventions, too, were not only like to build an immersive experience, but they also were to keep some of the stuff from collapsing. Um, this portion here, I don't know exactly what was there, but these bricks and these parts, these columns are all intervention. But the stone underneath and the stone up here is all original. And I don't know if those parts collapsed and then they rebuilt it or what the story is, but it's helping preserve some of it to some extent. Love it or hate it, that's the reality on the ground there. I wasn't the hugest fan of that, but the damage is done. Um, for the longest time, people thought that this palace existed in myth only, and there are still things that maybe people are less akin or less likely to believe in now that are written in historical texts as being myth because things like this were found. And people kind of thought he was a little nuts for trying to find it, but that was kind of a closed-minded viewpoint. There was nothing to suggest that this really existed in myth. I will say, though, that I feel like the guy that did all these interventions showed a lot of restraint by not painting old stones, because that very much could have been what happened. Um, he did not do that, thankfully. There was some limestone, though, that because it was exposed to the rain, like acid rain, I think, that it was starting to come apart, and that was kind of sad. But it is also a ruin, completely. It really was. I cannot underline how ruinous things were. It was completely buried to the point where people didn't know where it was. So, what can you expect? But an amazing archaeological find, though. This is one of the most impressive palaces ever created. And there's much that we learned about this society that existed on the island from finding this palace. This was from a later time period, though. I don't know if it could be considered Minoan, which was an earlier society that existed on Crete. Very Greek, but very much its own thing. There was a museum that I visited on Crete that was one of the best museums I've probably ever been to. Honestly, if you go to Crete, if you ever have the chance, go to this museum. Um, they have all of the Minoan stuff. If you're ever like, if you've ever been interested in learning more about the Minoan Greek ancient civilization. A really funny thing was a few weeks later, I went to a museum in Cambridge, and they had some things that were real, but a lot of it was just copies of things that we saw for real in that Manoa museum. And then they did talk about this guy that like excavated all of this and so on and so forth. But we saw it for real, and that was like, we already saw it. Can't tell me anything. What other colors do we have here? Taupe. Hmm. So taupe is kind of like a chocolatey brown. I'm just looking at my source images to see where that could fit in. This wood is kind of like that. Some of these pencils are a lot better than other ones. And I wonder if it's the color. It just feels like some of these are softer. They just go right on. The other ones are a lot harder to deal with. This is going on so smoothly. This area is kind of like that brown. The other thing that kind of helps the drawing too is if you use the same colors throughout the drawing, it might not exactly be accurate, but it adds like kind of a compositional element to it. Like your eyes will move around a lot more. If it starts to see the same colors kind of throughout, um, limiting a palette, and by that I mean limiting how many colors you use in a painting or a drawing. You can give it a style too. That's always nice. That's a constraint you can play around with, like try and color this whole thing in with only four colors, let's say. Make rules about where they go and when they're used. That could look really interesting. That could be a whole new discovery for you that you can play around with for a long time. Certainly could be that way. And maybe we'll do that one of these days. I'll just look at this photograph. We're gonna do this in just four colors and see what it looks like. You know, choose some lighter colors, choose some darker colors, use those as the shadows, the midtones, and the highlights. I'm using this darker brown to kind of make these like it's like shadows that are underneath. That's where some of that shading is helpful. 'Cause now I'm coloring the shading a different color and it's dark. And I barely had to use any pressure to like make that happen. If I wanted to too, I could just like lightly go over some of these cracks where the bricks meet. Do a little bit of that. The other thing I could do too, like kind of fill in this dirty part. So these old bricks are really dirty, and I don't know if it's because they're on the top and they're actually new bricks. They looked old, kind of got this moldy, crumbly look, but I'm going to fill in some of this dirty darkness, and this is going to have some other layers on top of it as well, like it's just like some black and stuff. And we'll take a break here pretty soon. It's a lot darker over that on these. You can fill in the shadow if you want. That's a really interesting part. Is this a shadow that cuts across like a sundial or something, right across the surface? And it cuts across these layers too, so I can fill in with that. Now add a lot more dimensionality to the picture. It cuts across that too. Very interesting shadows there. So this taupe pencil is very useful in getting us to where we need to go with this drawing. And I have a feeling about another colored pencil, which we'll use soon. But I'm going to take a break here. Let's zoom in a little bit though, so you can see where we're at. And we'll be back. All right, we're back. So, what should we work on next? My thing with colored pencils that I can never get over is how light they are. And I think that's why I usually don't work with them, because I don't really appreciate that lightness. It's not really so true when it comes to other mediums. Like, I do like watercolors. Um, those get pretty light, but yeah, just wish that these would be so much darker, like what I'm seeing. But again, talking about constraints, probably a good thing to have a little bit of a constraint in what I'm doing. Makes me think a little bit more about different decisions I haven't tried. Um, about a year ago, I've never, I'll back it up. I've never really liked dry pastels. I've never liked mediums that get your fingers dirty. And I took this class about pastels thinking that they were oil pastels. I think it was literally called like painting with oil pastels. And I get to the class and it was dry pastels. And I was like, I hate dry pastels. They're dirty, they get dust everywhere. I was feeling I can't work on them because of the dust. It's not a fun time. But I soldiered through this class and I learned a lot of things and I shouldn't say absolutely love them. I was like, oh wow, I can do some pretty cool stuff. And I definitely want to do more of that in the future on this channel. Show you some dry pastel stuff. Because I definitely have not seen anybody doing dry pastels on YouTube. And that would be a fun thing to do, I think. Introduce it. I'm sure there's some videos, but you really gotta dig to do that, to find things like that. I'm just filling it in, filling in the color where it needs to go. This one is very orange compared to everything else that we've done. And I wonder if I take this like melon mango color and put some of that in, what occurs? Okay, okay, I see you, mango. This one isn't as soft. That one takes a lot more effort to get in. It's kind of crazy how much effort. Let me know in the comments if you have a mango and it's hard to get the pigment in with a light touch. Just feels like that. I think though that this mango color is going to do a lot of work with some of this sand color. Because some of this stone was pretty orangey looking or gold looking. And I'm liking the way that that looks already. I'm liking that. Because there's other portions of this where it doesn't need the brown. It needs mango. Yeah, that looks better already. I'm color mixing at this point. So this has had the sand, some of the brown, and then mango. I'm just keeping an eye on what colors are what though in my source. So a couple more things I want to do, but getting to the point where we can try something that I was thinking about attempting. So I didn't go into much detail with these portions with the pencil, with the graphite pencil. So I'm going to try and do some of that detail with these pencils just to see what it looks like. So I'm not going to draw every single um, brick, but I'm going to do some more like harder details in this area to see kind of what it looks like, kind of like a test. So there's like these little square holes over here. Fill in with black. And I can give the slight impression that it's like all this stonework. I don't want to be heavy-handed with this because the pencil isn't that thin. So I'm just very lightly kind of like sketching a loose foundation of like these bricks. That's looking nice. And there's like this white board, kind of just ignored. I think I'm going to continue to ignore it. It doesn't, it's like a placard or a sign. Um, it just really isn't necessary. So there's tan, taupe, light brown, brown. I'm kind of filling in just like the lines of all these little bricks, just lightly. I'm always kind of opposed to like drawing in every single brick. If you can just like give the impression that there's a lot of bricks there, it'll look really nice. It'll look more realistic. It's still a colored pencil drawing, so it's like very stylized, but your eye will be focused on this center part, and this is just like in your periphery. If we were painting this, I think I would get like a flat brush and kind of fill those in. Um, like sort of kind of off the screen right now, but I think you kind of get the general idea. It's looking kind of like corn on the cob right now, though. Wish I just had like sort of like a darker brown, but that's sort of like the darkest brown I have. There's mahogany, which is like a red brown. This is literally called dark brown, so maybe that's the answer. This pencil has the answers. Kind of hard to see with the shine from that light. Okay. This top layer is much more dark and dirty. It's got a lot of shadow in between the cracks. Just really want to show that off. Give it kind of. I'm not super happy with that, but that will do. Um, wish I had like. I mean, I guess it's this mahogany. It just looks so red. What I'm looking for is like sienna, burnt sienna, I guess. Like this reddish brown. And it's just like not really seeing it in what I have, and that just looks too red. It's kind of not a thing. In the Crayola colored pencil world, there's just like a few colors that I always go to when I'm oil painting. And it happened too with that dry pastels set that I had where I was like, I really wish I had such and such a color. And it's just like, I just do not. You do not have that color. You're gonna have to learn to live without it, buddy. But it's just like so common in nature that it's like almost there's like no paintings that I've done where I did not use like these four colors. If you're wondering what the colors are, it's ochre, yellow ochre, um, burnt sienna, uh, raw umber, and burnt umber. And then I guess kind of like secondarily to those is like alizarin crimson and like a Dutch white, which is really just like tan um in these like colored pencils that we're using. It's just tan, the name of it. Okay, we're getting somewhere. We're getting somewhere. I think though we're going to do take that dark brown. Yes, take that dark brown and see what it does when I. Okay. I'm gonna do like art edge right there. Boom, laying it out for everybody. There's just like this black mold. It just looks like black mold. I'm sorry. Like I didn't want to say it before, but it looks like black mold. And it's just like on the surface of these like edges. I just want to fill that in. Give it this rough texture that it so requires. It's looking nice. This is like three different shades of brown on these surfaces. These are much harder on this side though. They really are. That's kind of one of those things that you just like have to get right, I feel like. So they use a straight edge and just really mark them in. It's so important to these type of drawings or paintings for that matter. When you see something that's real like a really hard edge and it's dark and stuff, like those are your chances to like really create the illusion of depth, create the illusion of light on real surfaces. This kind of had that mustard. I really like that color, but so it's just like use sparingly. You don't want it to dominate this. Pay attention to what colors actually are dominating it, you know? Okay. Let's look at what we have. Um, let's do a tricky little bit right here too. So remember where your vanishing point was? Because it's gone now. Just do kind of like a light little brick line. Do a little do. That action in there. Oop. Okay. Um, what I was gonna say was, let's do some of this darker column work, which is interesting. So if you let's look at our source material here. This may be some of the trickiest stuff in our drawing. And the reason why is those black, black in quotation marks. They, in the sunlight on the left side, appear like they're black. But if you really look, they are purple, they are tan, they're not black. So don't just like grab a black pencil and start filling them in. Um, if you color them the right way, they will look very good. They will look like they match with the rest of this. Conversely, on the other side, they are purple but very black. And there are some points, like at the top, where they are gray. Um, it's going to be tricky. It's going to be really tempting to press really hard on the pencils too, and that's not what we want to do. That is not what we want to do. But we will take another break here. My throat is really dry, so I have to kind of just like keep refilling on water. But we'll come back and I'll leave the art on the screen so you can keep working on it if you're following along. Or you can just like take a step back and look at the drawing compared to the source material over to the left. But I will be back momentarily. Okay, so we're back. It's probably a little fun little side tangent that we can do is just take some of this green, a little bit of green poking out through this like doorway. That's fun. I just like having a little bit of green in every drawing. Maybe that's more a sign of our times. If you look at interior design, I always got to have some plants in the room. Just kind of ties the room together. Having some green in photographs is always really nice too. But there are just like these little green spaces over here. Um, and then there's some nice sky blue in here. Looks good. Looks good. Feels good. Um, Maybe there's like a little green right here, a little green something, little weeds poking up. Really well kept grounds, by the way, when I was there. Very well kept, very um, built very nicely. The walkways that you walked through, everything was just like really just a good experience. And you could tell that it made good money for the island too. I'm going to fill in some of the shadow work that's visible here. So there's shadows underneath this walkway. I'm just taking a gray to see how that looks. I'm just making careful note of the angles, the shapes. This will help give it the depth that it requires. There's some of that action going on over here too, although these look a lot darker. There is some of this gray action going on in these columns. As I said, though, let's just be really careful with these. I really feel like these can make or break the whole composition. No pressure. And you know what? If you feel like you break, try erase. If you feel like you break, make a new one. If you break, you can always make again. As I said, I've already drawn this drawing twice. So I try to do that for most of these. Um, I use this black. I'm going to sharpen it really quick. So it's pointy. So I'm going to do some seriously fine point here. So that part, that line feels really dark. And it gives this demarcation of where that top ring starts and where the rest of the column below the peg leg begins. So it's super pointy. Now, again, my tendency is to press really hard. So I'm going to hold off on a lot of restraint. I'm only filling in the darkest darks with this black pencil. Restraint, folks. Okay. Just kind of looking back and forth at what I got going on here. So these dark squares behind the column are kind of like a forest green and black put together. Let's see, I have a pine green. That's like forest green. So let's see what that looks like. Really light, but it is laying down really nicely. That's cool. But I am gonna have to shade this really dark. Another problem is these beams are way too bright. I'm gonna knock them down a little bit with this brown. And they're still pretty bright. That's what makes this kind of challenging with colored pencils. It's like it's easy to make things that are very bright, because you have the brightness of the paper and the brightness of the pencils. But when you want to make something really dark, it's I always find it challenging to do. but this is kind of about challenging myself. So I'm here for it. That is for sure. Kind of toning it all down with this gray. See if that takes this down where we need to go. Because it's overall, it's way too light for what I'm actually seeing in the source material. It's just very dark. It's completely like a shadow world behind all of these columns and such. It's the same thing for the other side as well. Not so much that green, but we do need to fill in that. I'm just going to keep going with the columns though on this side, and I'm going to start with this violet purple. And we're probably going to do a lot of color mixing because it's like not a very bright purple that I'm seeing in real life. It's like this really dark purple. You can knock it down with some of this gray. In this column, though, kind of an interesting thing is some of the lines that we drew that I erased. Must have been very heavy with it because the indentations are showing up in the column. And that's not like the greatest thing in the world, but it's not super noticeable. That's what I was kind of talking about earlier when we were drawing all those lines. It's like, just be light, just be light. We don't need to write them in very hard. Okay, the other thing too is we need like a coral for these bottom parts. Um, Coral, this one's called salmon. What other ones do I have? Red orange. Got two red oranges. Either red orange, and then they kind of go into this lighter salmon when it hits the light from that side. So darker on the inside, red salmon on the outside. Cool. On the top, kind of the same situation. And paying close attention to where what the shape of each of these colors is on the column. Caught myself pressing a little hard there. Okay, the outside of these is gray, not black. Okay. And as much as I want to make the bands gold, they're not gold. They are some more of that peach sand color. Cool, cool. It's getting there. It's definitely getting there. I almost kind of want to hit this with this mustard green again, because it does almost look like that color. It's just that part seems like it's getting maybe a little bit overworked. This part's not making tons of sense. Okay. It's looking like something. Um, I'm liking it. You know, I just kind of feel like colored pencils, though, is just like not my favorite look. Obviously, there's some people that do fantastic colored pencil drawings, but it just comes through many, many years of practice. Actually, I didn't complete a thought that I was giving you earlier. So, when pencils get down to just like their bare little nubs, there's pencil holders or extenders, I think what they're called, that are just basically just like a shaft that has like a hole in it, and then you can put the little color pencil nub into it, and then you can then have the full control of a larger pencil. Because you can imagine if you're getting down to the really nitty gritty of it, it could be, you know, hurting on your hand or taxing on your hand. You couldn't get like this nice kind of movement that you would get from a larger pencil. Yeah, it's just I don't have them, but stuff like that like really makes all the difference in colored pencils. Um, okay, let's see for my violet purple. Let's give these columns a try now. I guess the other thing too that I need to think about is maybe the stream ends for tonight. I thought maybe I could get this all filled in one video, but it's looking like maybe it's going to be 4 videos altogether. It's a big drawing. If you followed along thus far, you know it's a big drawing, especially if you've not done something this detailed before. So I commend you for keeping up. And if you have done something this big before, good for you for following along. It's fun to try some different things. You know, in my normal art practice, I don't normally, usually I do things that are a lot more conceptual, but I don't normally just sit down and just like do a drawing of a building. But it's okay to branch out and try different things. I was talking about before, constraints, testing your bounds, testing what you're comfortable with, learning mentality. There's some things that you need to learn from this. I might not necessarily know from the beginning, but the longer you study something, the more it starts to reveal its secrets to you. That was something my high school art teacher always used to say. The more you study something, the more it reveals its secrets to you. And that is true. Um, the other quote that I always loved, or story, or what have you, was from a book by the drummer Neil Peart, the drummer from Rush. He Said music can listen to the same songs for years, and every time you can discover something new that you didn't notice before. A prize every time. And the reason why he said it like that is because it reminded him of when he used to work at a carnival as a teenager, and there were all kinds of different games. And he worked the booth at the games, different booths of the games. And one, he would stand out in the walkway and he would say, step right up, play this game, a prize every time. And that would entice people to the game. But he said that about music. And I feel that way about art. Whenever you work on a piece of art, whenever you look at art, you learn something new every time. And it's a prize every time. I hope you keep that in mind too. Keep working for those prizes. This is very rewarding. It will reward you. It will reveal its secrets to you. I promise. Over time. Share this with like-minded people. Share this with people you love in your life. It's just a good place to be in, making art on the regular. It's a great place to be in. And I can't always all the time, but whenever I get back to it, I just feel so enriched and renewed. My mood is so much more positive. My life has so much more meaning with art in my life. And it can be the same for you too. This can be kind of a frustrating experience if you don't know how to deal with that. But when you start to let go of attachment to the things you've made in the past, to the things you're making right now, and you let go of the outcome, that's when you'll get the prize. That's when you'll get this like love and zeal for art making. The two often get stamped out when we're children. Like when we're children, everyone's an artist. You just did not care about what it looked like. You did it for the love of it. And that's what we're doing here too. We're doing all this for the love of it. And I hope that you don't forget that. There's a reason why you're here. Okay. So that's all I'm going to do for today. I have most of it filled in. Um, Pretty good. I think maybe before I let you go, maybe I'll dull down some of this purple with a gray. It's just too purpley. And that's kind of the thing with colored pencils too. You're really locked into this on paper color mixing. You can get really satisfied with the way something looks, and then you look back or you look away or farther away from it, and it's not quite what you wanted. So, but yeah, it's coming along really well. I'm liking it. Well, we will continue on soon. I'm Kelvin. Um, thank you for coming out. Thanks for watching. Check out the first few videos if you haven't already. Check out the next one. Subscribe to the channel. That way you'll be notified every time I come out with a new video or a new live stream starts. And you'll have a couple minutes, give or take, to start the stream with me. But thank you for coming to Breaking Patterns. I'll be back soon.